Hello again. The channel is for you if you want to know what it takes to work with animals. This week, what does it take to work with crocodilians? There are 24 species of crocodilian around the world. Jobs with crocodilians include being a zookeeper, being a field biologist or academic, and there are probably jobs in crocodile farms as well, depending on where in the world you are. My next guest talks about the conservation of crocodiles and the skills needed to work with them in a zoo environment. I began by asking my next guest, Colin, who is the Director of Education at Crocodiles of the World here in England. What does his job involve?
We do get a lot of people that are interested in working with crocodiles. It's certainly a lot easier than when I was a bit younger. When I was a bit younger, there weren't any jobs with crocodiles, and you were seen even in Australia as a complete and utter nutter if you did want to work with crocodiles. So that wasn't very positive back then. But nowadays, certainly for people within the UK and other countries within Europe, zoos are your best bet. There's so many courses now through college, animal management courses, even professional development courses like one called the DIMS, the Diploma in the Management of Zoo and Aquarium Animals. So that's a professional qualification here. So that's there's, and of course, university, the standard university, zoology, biology type courses will stand you in pretty good stead in securing a zoo position. You would more than likely start as a keeper, and that would require experience. And that does not mean, oh, I've got experience with reptiles, I've got a bearded dragon at home. That doesn't work. A lot of people have bearded dragons or other reptiles at home. Have you, to put it bluntly, gotten off your bum and volunteered or at least done some work experience for extended periods of time at a zoo? If not, how much do you really want to work with these animals is going to be the question. So the practical element is becoming more and more crucial. If you've got fantastic grades at university, you apply for a zookeeping position. To be honest, we really don't care if you know all the academic side of things and know taxonomy inside and out. Are you going to freak out the first time you have to pick up some poo? If you don't have that experience, the practical element, it's probably not for you. It's more of an academic interest that you have in these animals. Nothing wrong with that. Just something to recognise, and that's the value of work experience. Zoos all across the country and across the world will offer work experience placements as we do. And we do get students come in here and within a day or two think, I really don't like this. Good, it hasn't. You have not wasted your week's work experience or work placement. You have just learned that you can cross off an entire field. Fantastic. You can now focus a little bit more on the elements that maybe you do want to pursue. So I think working with crocodiles, if you are in Europe or the UK, zoo work is probably your best opportunity. If you're in America or Australia or Africa, in other words, countries where there are native crocodilians, there's a few more options. It's still somewhat tricky. They're not found all over the place in these countries, so it does still require you to move if you want to work with them in the field. But
around the world, outside the UK, crocodilians are native. What other kind of jobs are there?
There's a lot of research positions. They're going to be some of the key ones. Again, that's going to require university study. You will have to have a degree these days. Probably at least something like a master's probably stands you in good stead. That actually can be a way in itself, either pursuing your master's or if you're a complete psycho, your PhD, and choosing a project that was in the field, having a supervisor within countries like Australia, or areas like, say, Queensland in Australia, Northern Territory, or Florida. There are also conservation-based positions. So if you're in, say, Florida or one of the southeastern United States or in Queensland, Northern Territory, or Western Australia, up in the high end where there are crocodilians, then they need rangers. There's rangers that that need to address the management plans that they have in those areas for the crocodilians, and the rangers, generally speaking, are going to be the ones implementing these programs. So that would entail everything from basic surveys, routine checks on areas where people and crocs are known to both frequent, maybe even capturing problem crocodiles and removing them to farms, or in most cases, let's be honest, if they're a problem crocodile, they're either going to be a handbag or a permanent resident in a farm. It's how it works, basically. So, wildlife rangers, again, you probably don't need university degrees for some of those positions, but for many of them, you probably would. There are always field projects that you can jump in. And just remember, too, some of these field projects initially, just to get your foot in the door, they need volunteers. They're not swimming with money. It's not flooding into them. They have to apply for grants to access the funding that they need, and that covers the basics.
Colin, please, can you describe your own connection with crocodiles?
I'm one of those, I'm a bit of I'm not only a crocodile nerd, so everything crocodiles, how old am I? I'm not young anymore, and I look around and I've got, little toys. This one's quite good. This one's got a nice little opening jaw. It's very nice. So, that's actually a throwback to when I first started liking crocodiles, because it was the age of 2. So I'm a little bit of a croc snob in that regard. So from my way of looking, if you weren't born liking crocodiles, then I'm sorry, you're not really a croc guy, are you? If you've just been watching Steve Irwin on TV and you start liking crocs, no, dismissed. So, with me, I've never, there's no memory of not liking crocodiles. As a kid, it was just, crocodiles, toy crocodiles. My mother had to go to the point of making me, instead of having a Superman cape and everything, I had a green vest with a crocodile on the front and a black cape with a green crocodile on it. So what the hell I was supposed to be, I don't know, but that says it all. Instead of being Superman, I was croc guy, so whatever you wanted to call it. It's taken decades for me to learn to pronounce some of the names correctly, because I learnt them at such a young age. And when you're a kid, you see these names, you have no idea of the pronunciation. So here I am, Paleosuchus, so it was Paleosuchus for years and years and years, one of the dwarf caimans. It was years and years and years later before I go, it's a Paleosuchus. Okay, rightio. But this reading means it's fantastic. I can dismiss so much of this scientific crap that you hear. Adaptation to this, that, and the other. Right, okay. Rubbish. Because whenever I read anything now, it's just adding to, I guess, a library of information inside this, little head of mine, that I can quickly assess where new research fits, and whether it's good, bad, or indifferent, really, which is quite handy. Having this strong foundation of being somewhat obsessed with crocodilians pretty much guaranteed that sooner or later I was going to be working with crocodilians. And, initially it was via the zoo world. We had a small zoo in Australia. I was doing things like that, taking crocodiles around to schools, frightening children. And then we had the zoo as well. The thing is, you want to work with these animals, and people, being people, especially parents, will tell you, grow up, be realistic. You can't work with those things. You're in England. What are you thinking? Yeah, just smile sweetly and leave the room, and ignore everything they've just said to you. If you really want to work with an animal, that's probably what you should be doing, don't you think? You obviously have something inside you that gives you the passion to want to work with these animals. That's what I'm saying is, go for it. If you're impatient like I was, have a look at the conservation route. Now, what this route entails is using your brain, basically. With me, there was no actual agenda. It was pure interest. I like crocodiles. I knew many of the people. I've been reading these books, like I said, since I was a kid. So I knew the main guys that were working with crocodiles around the world. Back then, it was the very early days of the internet. There weren't websites left, right, and centre. But there were these things called books. And I'd read a book which was published from the work of the Crocodile Specialist Group, which sounded pretty good to me. Now, where does the Crocodile Specialist Group come from? There's a group called the IUCN, International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the biggest and probably the oldest conservation organisation on the planet. Predominantly in the 60s, they obviously, with the realization that there were quite a number of different taxa that were becoming increasingly threatened, what they did was they basically picked the most critically endangered or most threatened taxa at the time. And in our case, let's talk about crocodiles. So they thought, okay, a lot of crocodilians around the world, they've been shot for their skins, unregulated hunting. It's decimated a lot of populations. We need some way of focusing on those. Now, they were doing this across the board with different groups of animals, but with the crocodile ones, they just contacted the people that were doing the most active within the zoo and the conservation world, or the wildlife management world, working with crocodiles around the world, got them together and said, nominated one of them to be in charge of the group, and said, right, you're now the Crocodile Specialist Group, document the situation of the world's crocodilians. So what I simply did was contacted the guy that was the CEO of the Crocodile Specialist Group, told him I wanted to get involved, found out they had a newsletter that they'd send around quarterly. Okay, paid for me to subscription for the newsletter. Well, just guess what? In that newsletter, every quarter, I got the current work that's being done around the world on crocodilians. That was really interesting to me. Not only that, but these articles, whoever wrote those articles conveniently put a little email address. I could then contact these people, which I started to do. I was just interested as a croc nerd in what they were doing and whether there was anything I could do to help. And then I found out, gee, you know what? Every 2 years they have a meeting somewhere in the world. There's a crocodile meeting for the Crocodile Specialist Group. It's a working meeting where they're discussing the current status of all the crocodilians. This is conservation meetings, conservation and crocodile management. It's not about how to look after a crocodile in a zoo. Just want to throw that one out there in case someone thinks they'll head to the CSG meeting and learn how to look after their pet dwarf caiman. It's not what it's about. I went to a couple of these meetings, and here I am in these meetings with the biggest crocodile experts on the planet. Offer to volunteer my time, effort, and money occasionally, as I could afford, but mainly my time and effort and energy to different projects. Oh, you're doing this. Oh, do you need someone to do this bit? I'll do that. So suddenly I'm working with these people. I'm now also helping with some of the red list assessments, which, again, that's what we're here for. This is the assessment of these species and their status in the wild, and trying to come up with the priority actions that are going to help and build that species and preserve it and protect it in the future. So I was interested, very passionate about crocodilians, had no agenda for, oh, yes, I want to be this and I want to be that. Sorry, there's some of these guys are way more clever than I'll ever be. They're more senior than I will ever be. I just want to do what I can to help these animals, and that's as simple as that. Check out the Crocodile Specialist Group website. There's so much information. You won't be able to read it all. There's also contact details. There's action plans for every species. There's links to the red list accounts. There's various manuals. The proceedings from every working meeting is loaded up on that website. There's an historical downloadable newsletters. You can go back and read all of the newsletters from the 70s. So wealth of information, contact details. Even if you're just flicking through or you have a particular species that you like, you just look through the years of data that is available on that website, you'll get a very good picture of that species and the conservation actions that have been made for that species, across the years. But you'll also get a very, very solid idea of all of the people that are currently and have historically been working on that species and in crocodilians in general. You are absolutely passionate about working for these animals. I've just given you a nice little foot in the door, a way that you can get involved in this world tomorrow if you want. I'm happy for you, John, to share my education at crocodilesoftheworld.co.uk email with the audience if anyone does have any questions that they want to fire at me.
That's absolutely brilliant, Colin. It's rare that I've come across such useful step-by-step advice for people. Absolutely brilliant. What an insight. Fantastic. Absolutely brilliant. I love that. Absolutely fantastic. I had no idea that the IUCN had such an online resource. I mean, wow, I'm going to be looking that up myself.
Yeah. We say the same. You want to work with sharks? Guess what? There's a shark specialist group. Look it up. It's really quite straightforward, and just keeping in mind again, these it is IUCN. It's under their Species Survival Commission. They have all of these specialist groups. There may be someone out there that likes plants. Well, guess what? Plant species are endangered. There's specialist groups for a whole bunch of the plants and trees as well. This is across the board. It's just not just crocodiles. This is, bears, rhinos, elephants, it's cats, it's everything. Check it out. I wanted to make sure that people knew that crocodiles were pretty awesome creatures. And at that stage of my career, making sure that people knew that was seemed to be an overriding thing with me. I really didn't care that people thought I was a weirdo for liking crocodiles. I thought they were weird for not liking them. I've been proven correct, of course. And when you think about the husbandry side, it forces you to learn an awful lot about the ecology and the habits of these animals without really good knowledge of, diet, nutrition, environmental parameters that they're required, responses to stress, general behavior, all that sort of stuff. You can't look after them properly in captivity. It's simple as that. So, I should mention I did write a book in there as well, Crocodiles of the World. Coincidentally, the publisher chose the title, published in Australia, but it is currently available on Amazon.
There's two things that I'm particularly pleased that you mentioned: the IUCN Species Survival Commission Crocodile Specialist Group, and also the Madras Croc Bank Trust. I mean, I remember seeing a documentary 20 years ago on that, but for people who don't know, are they involved in, is it just conservation? What does it do?
Madras Croc Bank was established initially as it was going to be a living repository of all of the crocodilian species. It's not a farm. It's a zoological facility.
Colin, what books or people or meetings have most influenced your own thinking about crocodiles?
Growing up, the work of a lot of the Aussie researchers predominantly. So Graham Webb would have been the key guy. He's the current chair of the Crocodile Specialist Group. Harry Messel, who was the guy that actually really kicked off crocodile research in Australia in the late 60s, early 70s.
Oh wow, Numenwari.
Yeah, it's early 80s he wrote that book. It's a novel. Of course, Ron Whitaker, a guy called in America called Kent Fleet, who's worked with alligators for forever and a day. It's John Thorbjarnarson, hard to say his surname, but he was just amazing, really. So he worked for the Wildlife Conservation Society and just went to different countries to work on that local crocodilian population, and the impact he had was just phenomenal.
I know exactly what you mean. Colin, how would you describe crocodile conservation today? What is the role of zoos or captive collections? What's going on in the wild? What are the main threats? What's the rarest species?
The most endangered is there's the Chinese alligators, about 150 left in the wild and fragmented population, and the Philippine crocodile, there's just over 100 left in the wild, and again quite fragmented. So the main threat is like it is with everything, it's habitat loss or destruction or deterioration in areas where there are growing crocodile populations. They do need to be managed, and that usually means if a crocodile is frequenting an area that is also used regularly by people, the crocodile will lose. It'll either be put down or it will be removed permanently to a farm or sometimes a zoo. Always the key. You've got to get the local people interested in actually managing these projects. They've got to be the ones that are on board and running the projects. And to be honest, most of them know more about the local wildlife than we ever will. I think zoos overall is the third largest contributor to conservation projects worldwide.
Colin, how do you see conservation going over the next 10 years? How are, for example, zoo licensing conditions changing matters? Are zoos obligated to assist foreign conservation projects? What's happening in the wild state? Are there more biologists going out there? Are local people taking over the projects? What's happening?
Currently, zoos are mandated to, under their license, to be contributing to conservation projects, so they have to be. And there's new zoo standards coming in here in the UK. When they're actually going to come in, I don't know, but when they do come in, they will be a lot stricter as far as conservation projects, and that includes field work. They must be contributing to field projects. So that's going to, if anything, they're upping the ante as far as zoo contributions to conservation. Any of the smaller ones that are really not doing much will probably face closure if they don't pull their finger out and do some conservation. You know, if you're not contributing to the populations in the wild, what's the point? There is no point to it.
Colin, is there anything that you'd like to add?
If you're passionate, you're dedicated, just do it.
Colin, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you. Absolutely fascinating. Thank you very much for being on The Practical Animal. Colin Stevenson, Director of Education at the Crocodiles of the World Zoo.
No worries. Thank you for having me.